Hey everyone, it's Autumn here, and I'm so happy to be back today with another video, another art video specifically. Today I am going to be creating a Nintendo Switch, a mini. That's the end result. I will end up switching out probably this thing, but for now it serves the perp. But the reason that I created this today is for a special day that's happening today. And that day is Dace's birthday. So this is actually a dedication video to him and a gift for him. So again, happy birthday, Dace, and let's get to it. So starting off, I'm just taking a piece of clay and working it to get the proper shape that I want to work with, so which is a rectangle. And just the right thickness as well. So I'm just rolling, squishing, and all of that fun stuff to, just get it to where I want it to be. Now I'm just scoring the edges of where the screen would be. Later on I end up actually just doing this all over again, so at this point it's kind of pointless. And now I'm just working on creating the Joy-Cons for either side. The first side I had started, and now it's just getting the same thickness for the second side. Okay, so here is where I started essentially like the first big mistake, and you'll see later on that I end up fixing it, but essentially I was looking at a picture of the Joy-Cons alone and not the full image of a Switch, so they had those attachments on for when you want to use them solo. So yeah, those extra, you'll see later on that I end up cutting them off, but yeah, right now what I'm doing is it ended up being too long for my liking, so I just cut it down and reattached the Joy-Con back on. For a Switch this size, you need very tiny buttons, so what I'm doing is rolling up very tiny pieces of polymer clay and then just creating the little buttons for them. And you'll see me starting to try and place them in their correct spots. I'm essentially using the spatula here to just kind of press down on the buttons to try and make them stick as much as I can anyway, and just try and align everything up here. You'll see me go back and forth a lot, cutting things off and reshaping things, and I think that's just like the part of sculpting, is it's just a lot of small details you have to keep going back and fixing or redoing or just kind of perfecting as you go along to get that finished product that you actually want. So to get rid of the imperfections and fingerprints, what I did was I just wet my brush with water, and then yeah, I'm just brushing over the sculpture to smooth everything out before I actually end up baking it. Part of this process is also, again, tweaking the little things, making sure everything's round and stuff like that. Again, this is now where I realize I messed up, so I end up cutting off those parts and then making the switch how it's actually supposed to be. I didn't like the way that these Joy-Cons were not sticking to the actual switch part when I was making my final touches, so what I ended up doing was cutting little pieces of wire and then connecting it all together so that it would stick a lot easier. There is this stuff you can get that is like a polymer clay but like liquid, and it helps bond stuff together or create a nice texture to certain pieces you want to use it for, but I didn't have any of that on hand and I didn't feel like going out and getting any, so I just worked with what I had. This is again where I'm scoring the outside like I was doing in the beginning, but because so much has changed since then, I had to redo it, and this time I just freehanded it because it was too much of a hassle to use a ruler. And here I'm just covering up the wire that ended up poking out at the side there. So this is pretty much where we're at right now in terms of it being complete before throwing it in the oven. The last thing I want to do is just create a hole for where the keychain part is going to go in. So I just take a wire and start pretty much stabbing it in and making a hole as big as I can for it to fit. I didn't actually measure anything, so yeah, this is all kind of just go with the flow kind of stuff. Now this is after it's been baked, and some pieces didn't stay on. Like I said, that like liquid epoxy, or not epoxy, sorry, polymer clay stuff would have kept it on, but I didn't have it obviously, so right now I'm just using super glue to reattach those pieces. And when I lifted the switch off the pan, it kind of left that mark. I didn't have a sheet of paper down to separate it. So I'm just going to smooth it out with now my epoxy sculpt, which is just an air dry clay. Instead of actually having to bake it again, we'll just let it sit for a couple hours after I smooth out the bottom. Now we're on to the fun and easy part, which is paint mixing and painting. So yeah, right now I'm just gonna do the darker gray black color for the majority of the switch. And by easy, I just mean this part. The blue part is actually a lot harder because of all the small little buttons you gotta work with, but yeah, just keep watching, you'll see what I mean. You may see me stretch my hand like that a couple times. That's just me stretching it out after painting on these tiny little buttons. When you do that, your hand starts to cramp up a lot, so yeah, sometimes you just need a little hand workout. This small paintbrush I'm using may look pretty small, but honestly, getting into the cracks and crevices, it wasn't enough. So I think I may end up actually picking up one that's even finer than this one. I know that's hard to believe, but yeah, you can get a lot smaller with paintbrushes. What I was tweezing out here is just a hair that got caught in the paint, so yeah, sometimes my fingers are just too big to pull that out, so I just use tweezers. Before was a black and white mix for the body of the switch, but now this is just straight black. That's just for the outline, just outside the screen. I didn't want the screen to be black or the gray color, so what I did was I mixed black, white, and blue just to give it a little bit of a blue kind of undertone so that it was just a little different from the rest of the switch. Here is where we're at so far. Now it's just time to put on the lettering on the back. So I was just trying to find the sizing there, and now I'm flipping the image and then tracing over it. Essentially what I'm planning to do here is trace it, and what I'm hoping is if I use enough of pencil like hard enough or use like a thick enough pencil, it will transfer onto the switch, and then I can just kind of paint over top of that. But you'll see here that yeah, that doesn't pan out so well. I've definitely used this method before on paper, but I've never tried it on top of paint or anything like that. So this was definitely just a trial and error situation. This is where I tried transferring it onto the paint, and it just, yeah, you'll see when I lift it off, it just doesn't work at all. So now here it looks a little wet or like wrinkled. That's because I used water to kind of see if it would transfer that way, but it didn't. So the last resort kind of thing was to just freehand everything. This part took probably about an hour of freehanding painted letters, but honestly this kind of work is like my favorite. The small details, the intensity, the focus, all of that. Yeah, I just love when projects get to be a little bit more lengthy like this. Yeah, it's just a lot of fun for me. I messed up on the T there a bit, so I just cover it in with the dark gray paint again, and then just decide to clean up the productions part of the lettering. Here it's the same thing, just going back and fixing up the letters with the dark gray and again with the white, just flipping back and forth to kind of fix it and make it all perfect. And here now I'm just putting on the back triggers buttons and then also where the screws would go into the switch as well. Here I'm using a Mr. Super Clear and the Liquitex gloss varnish. For the Mr. Super Clear, I actually use this for my dolls. It helps the watercolor stick to the vinyl. I typically wouldn't use this, but I didn't have any other varnishes on hand, so yeah, I just used that one. I would have probably used another Liquitex matte varnish instead of that, but this one here, the actual Liquitex I'm using is a gloss, so what it'll do is make it super shiny at the end, even when it dries. So the whole switch will be matte, and then the screen part will be the glossy part. Okay, so home stretch. Now we're just putting in the keychain after everything has dried. I don't actually think this is a good idea for the keychain size. It's too big. I would put a smaller one in, so I will later on, but it's what I had on hand, and I'm really trying not to chip the paint, but I totally did. We'll just ignore that for now though. But yeah, that is pretty much the conclusion. It took me a total of 4 hours and 30 minutes, I believe, in total from start to finish, not including drying time or baking time. But yeah, that's everything. Thank you so much for watching, and hope you guys enjoyed.